Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my July wrap up. You can tell I'm coming at you from a very blank background. This is kind of an empty room still after moving, so if it's a little bit echoey, that's why. Also, I've been having some allergies the last couple of days, so I've been pretty congested. I'm feeling a little bit better today, but if I sound off and I look a little crazy, that's probably why. Anyways, I'm here a little bit late, not super late, to do my July wrap up. So, you guys probably know by now that I just moved from Florida to Minnesota. So, I did read a little bit less this month, but honestly, I still did pretty good. Luckily, I was able to get a lot of reading done during the drive because I was not actually one of the people driving to Minnesota, so that was quite nice. So I'll pop up my stats like I normally do. I read 16 books in the month of July, which came out to 3,084 pages and 20 hours and 21 minutes of audiobooks in July. And my average rating for the month was 3.5 stars. Also, before we get into it, obviously, with moving and everything, I haven't been reading a whole lot recently, and my mind has been busy on a lot of other things. So I'm going to try my best to be coherent and give you guys actually good reviews for all of these books. But my brain's a little bit of a mess right now, so it feels like some of these books I look at and I'm like, I feel like I read this a year ago, not a month ago. So just bear with me. So, as usual with all of my wrap-ups, I'm going to go through everything that was filmed and talked about on the channel already, so reading vlogs that I did, and then we'll get into everything else. So the main reading vlogs that I put up in July were for Summerween. I uploaded 2 Summerween reading vlogs. So in those, I read Coup de Grace, which was a 2-star read for me, Shutter Island, which was a 4-star read, When the Wolf Comes Home, which was 5 stars, my only 5-star for the month, and probably a new favorite horror book of mine. It will likely end up in my top 10 by the end of the year. And then I read some vampire books. I read The Gathering, which I gave 3.5 stars. Same with The Madness. That was 3.5 stars as well. And then I read We Love the Nightlife, which I ended up giving 4 stars. So those Summerween vlogs will be linked down below if you want to see my full thoughts on all of these and get some more of an idea of what these books are about. So from here we will go into everything else that I read in the month of July, starting with my lowest rated all the way up to my highest rated. So my lowest rated book for the month was Kill Creatures by Rory Power, which I am so disappointed by because this is one of my most anticipated releases for 2025. So this is a young adult horror book, but I read Wilder Girls by Rory Power, and I really love that one. That's like a 5-star for me. So I had really high expectations going into this one. We are following a girl who 3 of her best friends went missing or are kind of presumed dead. So it's now a year after that incident, and they are at this vigil for the girls, and one of them turns back up, and everybody of course is relieved that she's still alive, but our main character is not relieved because she is actually the one that killed this girl and the 2 other girls that went missing. So this one I just felt to be lacking overall. It's one of those that I finished it and I was like, I feel like I only read half of a book, like the rough draft for a book, because it didn't really feel like anything was built out within the world. You're in this really small town, and I just didn't feel immersed in it. I didn't feel that atmosphere and the setting of where we were. I didn't really feel connected to the characters. I also found it to be quite predictable. There's kind of a twist that comes in at the end because this is like a horror thriller, more thriller leaning, where you're trying to figure out what actually happened with these girls, but we know that the main character killed them, so I feel like that takes a lot of the mystery out of it, and it's pretty easy to figure out what's actually going on as the book goes. I don't know, I just felt very unsatisfied upon finishing this book, and it just kind of, I was like, okay, where's the rest of it? Because this doesn't feel like a complete novel, and I'm really, really sad about that. Then I had a couple of 3 stars. The first one was The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I honestly don't remember a lot about this book. This is kind of like a historical horror book. We are back in the day with this main character living in this village where there's a lot of folklore about these creatures from the woods and the dark woods that you're never supposed to enter, and she ends up getting caught up with something, this curse and this legend of these witches that has been brewing in this town for some time, and she finds that she is more closely related to this curse than she believes she is. I don't know. I didn't really feel connected to the story with this one again, or the characters. I thought it was interesting enough. I liked the atmosphere and the setting of it, and it had a lot of themes that you would think would be something that I enjoy, but just, I don't know, I just was never really fully immersed in the story, and so I didn't really care too much about what was going on with that one, and it just wasn't very memorable. My other 3-star was Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones, which I thought would be a pretty highly rated one for me because I love Stephen Graham Jones, and this is one that I've heard so many people love, even people that aren't like super big fans of him, kind of more casual readers, still really enjoy this book. This is about a boy whose father has died, and he is like seeing his father's ghost inside of the home, and he is kind of uncovering a mystery with that. It's also like a very emotional and very like psychological one because it's really about like the family and everything that they've been through together. Our main character has a brother, and then, you know, his mom is single as well, and then being native, their mother had to make the choice when their father died to move them off of the reservation in order to give them a better life, and obviously that's a very difficult decision, and it really does look at that. It's more like about the family and everything that they've gone through and the bond that they have, more than it is like a ghost story or a horror book. I feel like a lot with this one kind of went over my head, and I just didn't really like feel that emotional pull and emotional connection to it that it seems like a lot of other readers are feeling. Then I read Chlorine by Jade Song. This one I gave 3.5 stars. This is another one that I kind of had a little bit high hopes for just because I've heard so much love for it, and it's been on my TBR for quite a while. This is about a girl in high school, and she is really passionate about swimming, and she believes that she is transitioning into a mermaid, and that's kind of what we're following her. And it's a lot about just her life as a high schooler, her relationships, friendships, romantic relationships that's a little bit queer. It's also about women and societal expectations of women and misogyny, and it does have a lot of like feminist commentary in it for sure. The body horror in here as well was fantastic, but overall it just once again was one of those where I didn't feel fully connected to the story and fully connected to the characters, and it also, I feel like, gave away too much in the beginning, and there's kind of this moment in the book where this like big shocking thing happens, but you are kind of given that in the prologue, and the book almost like spoils itself, which is a little bit disappointing because you kind of go into it and you have this in mind of like this thing is gonna happen, and so when it does happen, it's still shocking and crazy, but not nearly as shocking as it would be if the prologue didn't exist. I liked a lot of the messaging. Like I said, I liked the body horror. There were a lot of things that I did enjoy about this one. I just never fully felt pulled into the story, so it only got 3.5 stars from me. Now we are going to get into all of my 4 stars. The rest of my fiction books, I had 5 other books that were 4 stars for me this month. So the first 4-star book that I had was The Staircase in the Woods by Chuck Wendig. I listened to this as an audiobook. This is kind of has some roots, I feel like, in like creepypastas of people finding staircases in the woods, which of course that's like a real thing, like people have actually found these, but then, you know, all the horror stories and the creepypastas that have come off of it are not real. But I feel like Chuck Wendig kind of took the idea of that and ran with it, and he actually does have like a section at the end of the book where he's talking about his idea for it and how it came to fruition, which I thought was really interesting. But we have this group of friends that are kind of like estranged, and they get contacted by one of their old friends to come out for a camping trip, and they end up going on this camping trip, and there is a staircase in the woods, and we find out that way back in the day, before they became estranged, when they were still teenagers in high school, they went on a different camping trip, and one of their friends actually went missing after going up a staircase in the woods. So now that they're back, and they are clearly brought there for an ulterior motive to go up the stairs and like find their lost and missing friend. There's a lot of tensions within the group around that, because they were kind of lured there under false pretenses, but they end up all going up the stairs together, and then I'll leave it at that. But I did really enjoy like what happened, like some of the imagery and like the idea for the book I thought was really, really interesting. What they find at the top of the stairs and how that all works and is described, I thought was really, really cool. Overall, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed seeing them in this situation and having to figure out how to get out of it. It was just an idea and a premise that I really, really enjoyed. But I can't really say too much more about it without slightly spoiling it. Before I went into the book, I had watched somebody else's video where they said like what is at the top of the stairs, and I don't think it's like a really big spoiler, but I also do think it's kind of fun to keep some of that mystery and not know anything about what they find at the top of the stairs. But I really liked everything once they go up the stairs, and that storyline, and how they navigate that world. Then I read a couple of arcs in July. These are 2 books. I think they both publish in August. I know this one publishes in August. The Dead Husband Cookbook by Danielle Valentine. This is a thriller book. So in this book, we have this woman whose husband was like a famous chef, and then one night he went missing. He just kind of disappeared, and nobody ever saw him again. And then shortly thereafter, his wife then started to get famous for her recipes and creating cookbooks and then selling frozen products, and just kind of made this whole big empire for herself around cooking and recipes and things that her husband seemed to do while he was still in the picture. So that has led to a lot of conspiracy theories. People think that she killed the husband. People think that she killed the husband and used him as like her secret ingredient in all of her food. And it just has led to a lot of speculation. She has never spoken about the night that her husband went missing, so then she contacts our main character, who is a journalist, reporter, whatever she does, something in that space, and she says like, I want to write a tell-all memoir, but I want this girl to be the one that writes it, and I'm not going to make a deal with anybody else. And our main character like jumps at that opportunity. She doesn't really have a choice, of course, but she jumps at the opportunity, and she ends up going out to the remote mansion where this woman lives, and that is where she was staying as she is working on the memoir. And then she gets wrapped up in the mystery and the conspiracies and begins to uncover some of the truth of what really happened that night that her husband went missing, and what might still be occurring in that house. I thought it was really, really interesting. I thought it was very compelling. Like, once I got the setup of the story and was a little bit into the book, like, then I was hooked, and I just wanted to keep reading to see what was going to happen. I was a little bit wary at first because it does kind of give you like a little bit of an Evelyn Hugo type of setup, but I don't think it's really very similar to that. As far as like the main similarities within the synopsis, once you get into the story, it's entirely different, and I liked the way it unfolded. I liked guessing along with the character at what was happening, and I don't know, I thought this was a pretty good, solid thriller, and it still kind of has the same themes of like stuff that Danielle Valentine has written before, where it's talking about like motherhood and family and womanhood. So that was a fun one. And then the next arc that I read is called My Name Isn't Paul, which of course once again was a 4-star book. This is a little novella. It's kind of like a cosmic horror novella, where we have this main character. I'm gonna try my best to explain this. Our main character is an alien life form that has kind of like hijacked the body of this man named Paul and kind of taken over his life, and that's just how these aliens work, is they just like find a body and then they inhabit that body. So he is Paul, but his name isn't Paul, hence the title. And there is a certain stage in the lives of these alien life forms where they go into heat and they are focused on breeding and reproducing, and that is a very crazy and dangerous time, and it makes them very bloodthirsty. And we are dealing with Paul as he is kind of approaching this time where he is going to go into heat and is very much trying to suppress it. And that's all I'm going to say about this one. It's really, really difficult to kind of explain the premise, but I thought it was really, really fun. If you like cosmic horror and the idea sounds interesting to you, I would definitely give it a try. This does get bloody and it does get gory and it's a little bit wacky and it's weird and a little bit difficult to follow at times, but like I feel like it's pretty easy to understand what's happening because the author, I feel like, explains everything really well of like how these aliens function. It does maybe come off a little bit info dumpy as you're getting all of that information, but I really, really enjoyed this. It was also kind of funny and it made me laugh out loud a few times, and it was just interesting to follow. My next 4-star read was Carl's Doomsday Scenario, which of course is the sequel to Dungeon Crawler Carl. So being a sequel, I can't say too much about the plot, but we are back with Carl and Princess Donut in another level of the dungeon. I really, really liked this one. I loved these characters. I loved seeing more development in them as they're getting deeper and deeper into the dungeon world, and things are changing and new rules are happening, and seeing new characters and new sort of like technologies that they are utilizing was really, really fun. I liked the setting of this one as well because like not all of the levels are the same, right? They're kind of different settings for each level, so I really, really liked this one. I don't know, it was just really fun to follow, and I'm really excited to pick up the 3rd book eventually at some point. But that was a 4-star for me. I gave the first one 4.5 stars, and this one like could have been the same or even a 5-star, but there were a few things that were a little bit repetitive, and I don't mean like plot wise, because plot wise it's going to be a little bit repetitive because you're kind of following them as they get into a near-death experience and then they fight their way out and then they're like get into a near-death experience again. That's not what I meant by repetitive. I just meant like the actual writing and phrasing of certain things within the book where he would, I don't even know like a specific example, but something would be explained and it would be like, Carl made this decision because this, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then like 3 pages later it's like written again, like Carl made this decision because of this, and I'm like, didn't I just read this? Like there were a few times where I was like, am I reading the same paragraph again and I don't realize it? But it's just things were a little bit repetitive in that way. Just a few moments. It wasn't like unbearingly repetitive. Unbearingly, what am I trying to say? Like it didn't happen a whole lot. It was just a couple of times that I did take note of while I was reading, and so that's why it's not higher than a 4. The last 4-star book that I had was another novella. This is And the Devil Cried by Christopher Triana. You guys know by now that Christopher Triana is one of my favorite authors when it comes to extreme horror. In this one, it's kind of hard to explain the plot. Like even reading the synopsis before reading it, I was like, what the hell does any of this mean? We are following this man who has just gotten out of prison. He is a horrible, horrible, horrible person. Very, very unlikable main character, which is the point. It's extreme horror, right? So he has gotten out of prison and he is like kind of working for this other guy, and something happens and this man gives him a job involving a young girl. I think she's like 11 years old or something like that, and our main character has his own plans for this girl, and that's all I'm gonna say, really. You are just reading about the most awful things: murder and sexual assault and kidnapping and all of that you would expect with extreme horror from a despicable main character. But it was definitely one where it's like, I feel like this is kind of all of Christopher Triana's books, is like, it's so fucked up, but the way that he writes and the way that he tells his stories is like hard to look away, and that's definitely how I felt in this one. And then we did get a moment at the end that I really, really enjoyed. I liked the way that it wrapped up, because towards the end I was getting a little bit nervous. I was like, okay, like what are we really doing here? Like what is going to be accomplished by the end of this book? And I should not have questioned it for a second, because I really enjoyed the ending of this one. If the angle looks different, that's because the battery just died and I had to replace it. Anyways, last but not least, I read one nonfiction book in the month of July. That is The Secret History of the Rape Kit by Pagan Kennedy. I ended up giving this 3 stars because I had some issues with it. But this is primarily about, I mean, what the title says, the history of the rape kit, how it came to be developed, the woman that is primarily responsible for the creation of the rape kit. It also talks a lot about the time period when it was invented and the presence of rape culture and how difficult it was for women during that time to be recognized for anything and to be taken seriously when it comes to sexual assault, and just how much worse it was even from today. So the woman really that had the idea for the rape kit was named Marty Goddard, and this is where it gets a little bit weird with the author, because I felt like this book was not very well organized. Like, it felt very messy and was kind of jumping all over the place, and the author is diving into the history of this and trying to tell the history of the rape kit and how it became created, and then she gets hung up on Marty Goddard, which I understand, wanting to track down this woman and get her to tell her story and speak to her directly as the source for this thing that you are writing. But then the book kind of like takes on this like feeling of like, now it's about a mystery of like the author uncovering where Marty Goddard is, because she kind of dropped off the face of the earth and no one has heard from her. Nobody knows where she is. And then during this, the author kind of has like a weird, I don't want to call it parasocial, because I don't think parasocial is like the right word, but like kind of like a one-sided relationship with Marty Goddard, and like is looking up to her, which that's one thing, but then like multiple times throughout the book is like, oh, I feel like she's like the mother that I never got to have, and I feel like through doing all this research and writing about her that we're like friends already, so I'm gonna call her Marty. And like, I don't know, it just like kind of gave off a little bit of a weird vibe, and I was like, okay, what are we doing here? What is the point of this book? I think there was some really interesting information in here, and I think it was very informative in a lot of ways, learning about the history of the rape kit, and like I said, like things that I had never known before, and how difficult that was to develop it, and just where the idea for it came from. But then there was all this other weird stuff with the author, and then it was also kind of half memoir. So she's like telling us her specific experiences of growing up and being assaulted by people close to her, which I understand, like, this is a topic that hits close to home and something that you want to write about, but like, maybe just write a separate memoir, because I feel like as a reader, if you pick this up and you're expecting to learn something informative about the history of the rape kit. I don't think what you're seeking is a detailed recollection of the author being pinned down and like sexually assaulted as a child. I don't know. That's just, I feel like that should be a separate, write your own memoir on the side, right? And keep this one to the facts and the history. So I feel like it could have gone with some more editing, but I guess before the book became a thing, the author had written like a blog post about the rape kit, and I think she said like that was during COVID, and so it didn't gain a lot of traction. So I feel like she just took that original blog post and then was like, okay, how do I make this long enough to be a book? And then that's why we got all this other weird shit in there. Just as a nonfiction, I don't think it was very well executed or well organized, and I was really disappointed by that because I do think that there was a lot of information and a lot of things that I did gain from reading it. With all of that being said, it's been a struggle to film this video because like I can feel myself like I'm not breathing properly because of this like congestion, and I'm like so out of breath. But we got through it. So that is all of the 16 books that I read in July. If you're watching this, if you've made it this far, let me know down below what was your favorite book that you read in the month of July. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.